Hello and welcome back. Please remember to complete all discussions and assignments in the module before the posted due date, and feel free to contact me with any questions. In this lecture, we will begin looking at the 4 different subfields of anthropology. Let's begin with our first one, cultural, or also known as social or sociocultural anthropology. Cultural anthropology is the study of all aspects of human behavior, thought, and feelings. As we know, humans continually produce and reproduce culture. So let's go ahead and define culture. Culture is defined as a society's shared and socially transmitted ideas, values, and perceptions. Culture helps us to understand our experience and to generate reciprocal behavior. For example, we can think about birthday parties. We understand what it means to have a birthday party in our own culture. But do you understand what it means to have a birthday party in another culture? I was in this exact situation in 2010. I was in southern Mexico, living amongst a Yucatec Mayan population in a very remote village in the jungle. And we were excavating a lowland Mayan site. We were doing archaeology, but we were living in this local population, in amongst them. And one of the people in the village that was working with us, named Leo, was having a birthday. He was turning 50. And we didn't know it. And some of the other local people came up to us and they invited us to a party. They let us know that Leo was turning 50. There was going to be a big birthday party celebration, and they wanted us to be invited and to be a participant in it. And we said, sure. What do we need to bring? What do we do? We don't know what the routine is. We don't know what the ritual is for a birthday party in the middle of a jungle amongst a Yucatec Mayan population, let alone for a 50th birthday party. 50 is a big one. So they said, don't worry about it. All you need to do is show up. We'll take care of everything else. And we said, all right, well, if that's what you want, that's fine. We'll be there. So we said, well, when? And they said, well, you're going to meet us at this one crossroads at midnight on this particular night. And there were only 4 of us that were Americans there. 5 of us, I think. 5, yeah, there were 5 of us Americans. And we thought, you want us to meet you at midnight on this dark road. It's all gravel roads. There was no paved road where we were. And we thought, yeah, we're getting punked. We're either getting pranked or this could be dangerous. And so we thought about it. Some of the other archaeologists I was working with said, no, we're not going to go. And I said, come on, let's do this. Let's see what this is all about. So 2 of us decided we were going to do it. And so the other person said, I will wake up. You wake up. I'll wake up. I'm going to stay in my hut. They were in a separate hut. There was a hut for the men and a hut for the women. And she was in the other hut. And she said, I'm going to sit in my hut and wait. And I said, okay, that's fine. So I get up at midnight, kind of peek out the door, look down the street, and it's just dark. I don't hear anything. There's no moon. There's nothing. It is dark. I don't see anything, and I don't hear anything. Just the sounds of the jungle in the middle of the night. And I thought, yeah, we're getting punked. So I'm sitting there kind of on the little front stoop porch. I don't know what you want to call it. The little cement landing out in front of the door to the hut I was staying in. And I hear a little bit of footsteps behind me, and it's one of the girls, one of the female archaeologists that we're working with, one of my colleagues. And she comes up and she goes, this is a prank, right? I said, I don't know. And then, surprisingly, another one of my colleagues shows up, another one of the archaeologists. And so the 3 of us now are sitting in the dark, waiting to see what's going to happen. And we're just thinking, yeah, we're getting pranked. This is just to make them wake up in the middle of the night. Leo's house, his hut is across the street, and it's dark. There's not a sound coming from it. There's no lights on, nothing. So we decide to wait a few minutes, and we're waiting, and all of a sudden we can hear some footsteps coming down the road. And it's a gravel road, so you hear this crunch, 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 crunch. Somebody's walking on the road, and they're getting closer because we can hear the crunch, 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 getting a little louder. We still can't see anything. Then we hear it even closer still. Crunch, 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 crunch. Now we can see silhouettes of two people walking down the road. They're coming toward us, and we thought, okay, well, Leo's hut's across the little gravel road. Maybe they're going to his place. So we just stayed perfectly still. We did not know what to expect. These two shadows go up to the window by Leo's hut. They literally go to the window, and they pull out a guitar, and they start strumming the guitar, and they're serenading Leo. And they're singing songs, very, very quietly and softly singing songs. And Leo comes to the window, and he starts yelling at him. He's yelling, "I'm old, go away, I'm old, I need my rest." And they're kind of laughing and giggling, and they stop. Give it a few minutes, and then they start up again. And this time, they're singing a little louder than they were before. They're not so quiet and soft. Leo comes to the window again. "I'm an old man now. Come on, you got to leave me alone. Come on, I need my rest. I'm tired. I'm not young like you guys." Then he goes back to sleep, and they're laughing pretty good. So then they get really loud, and they're really making a lot of noise out his window. And he goes, "Fine." He comes to his window. "Fine, I'm awake now. You idiots." That's not the term he used, but it was pretty funny. So he goes, "Come on in." So then the lights turn on, and all of a sudden, we hear all these other people walking on the road toward the hut. And Leo's wife brings out all these cookies and goodies that she had made during the day. And people are pulling bottles of tequila out from underneath their clothing. It was a lot of fun that night. I'll tell you, it was a lot of fun. And my other two colleagues that decided to sleep through it literally slept through all the noise we made, all of us, and they missed out. They really were mad the next day when we were telling them how much fun we had and what it was, what happened. And they were really mad that we didn't wake them up. It was fun. When I see those colleagues, I still see some of them every so often, and they're not so happy. They remind me that I should have woken them up. But it was a lot of fun, and we wound up sitting around and singing songs and having cookies and sharing drinks. And they wanted us to sing an American song, and the only thing that we could come to mind was Freebird, but Freebird is not a song that you can really sing together. So it really turned awkward, and we just wound up laughing. It's a lot of fun. So when we think about culture is something that's shared and it's transmitted between people, but not all people, right? Because not everybody knows what a 50th birthday party in Quintana Roo in southern Mexico entails among a Yucatec Mayan population. So I learned that night what it was, and I learned it by observing it, but by also through participating in it, because I was invited to be a participant. So I learned about it, and then I'm able to share that knowledge with you, not through participation, but by recalling the events. So this is what culture is all about. It's all about sharing experiences and about understanding experiences. And culture really comes down to being a set of knowledge about ways that people do things. It's a set of knowledge about our behaviors. That's why culture helps us understand our experience and to generate behavior. I didn't know what a Yucatec birthday entailed, but I learned it. The same as anyone is capable of learning behaviors. Culture is socially learned. It is not biologically inherited. Everyone has the same abilities to learn culture because no one is programmed, no one is biologically programmed to understand a particular culture. We all have the same ability to learn culture and to express it. All right, our next subfield of anthropology, our second subfield of anthropology, is what's known as linguistic anthropology. Linguistic anthropology studies the origin of language and speech. Language is a unique human characteristic, and linguistic anthropology studies the relationship between culture and language. And it does that through something that we call linguistic relativity. Linguistic relativity is a theory that basically states that linguistic diversity, the diverse words that we use, reflect how members of a particular culture perceive the phenomena around them. So in this image, basically we can think of this image as a frozen wasteland, right? It looks like an ice flow. We can think of what we're looking at as, generally speaking, we're looking at frozen water, right? And I want you to think about all the different terms that we may have for frozen water. Go ahead and think about those terms. You're probably thinking about snow, ice, slush, hail, sleet. That's really it for frozen water. Frost, there's frost, right? We don't have a lot of terms for frozen water because in our culture, we don't rely on frozen water for our everyday activities. Yeah, we like it in our drinks because we like having cold drinks, right? Yes, we use the frozen water. We use ice to store things, to keep things cold. But really, our lives do not depend on frozen water. Refrigeration is different. It's not necessarily using frozen water, that's using chemical refrigerants, right? Our lives don't necessarily rely on frozen water and our understanding of frozen water. Therefore, we don't really have a lot of terms for it. However, the Inuit have 97 different terms to describe different forms of snow and frozen water. 97 different terms. They need to know if that snow is going to be the really heavy, sticky stuff or the really light stuff. Because if you're going to walk through it, you need to know how much effort it's going to take. They need to know if that ice is thick enough to hold the weight of themselves, or if that ice is going to be really thin and you're going to fall through. Their lives do depend on an understanding of frozen water and the different qualities of it, the different types of frozen water. So they have 97 different terms. That's linguistic relativity. The more important something is to a culture, the more terms they will have to describe that particular thing and the qualities of that particular thing. All right, our third subfield of anthropology is anthropological archaeology. Archaeology studies the material remains of past human cultures. It does not study dinosaurs. If you're interested in dinosaurs, that's paleontology. I would direct you to a geology department or a biology department. Archaeologists do not, under almost every circumstance, do not study dinosaurs. Okay. So we study the material remains of past human cultures. This can include pottery, tools, hearths, which are fire pits, houses, shipwrecks, anything that people left behind. That's what archaeology studies. Archaeology is often divided into two different parts, prehistoric archaeology and historic archaeology. Prehistoric archaeology is the study of cultures that existed prior to writing. Now, prior to writing does not mean simply 20,000 years ago. There are still cultures that do not have writing. So if you were to study those cultures today that don't have writing, you would be studying prehistoric archaeology, a prehistoric culture. Historic archaeology just means that you are doing the archaeology of cultures that wrote stuff down. That would be historic archaeology, the archaeology of cultures that had writing. If they wrote stuff down, they've got a historical record. If they didn't, there is no historical record. And in that case, you must rely on the archaeological record. Now, if you're doing historic archaeology, you can still study the archaeological record because that archaeological record is a record of all the stuff that people left behind. That's what we find. We recover artifacts. We recover sites. We uncover sites and we recover artifacts. And all that stuff forms the archaeological record. So this is an important distinction to make here. Texts help archaeology, and archaeology helps us understand texts. The final subfield of anthropology is the focus of this course. That is biological anthropology. Biological anthropology studies humans as biological organisms in the framework of evolution. Because we are biological organisms, we study humans using biological perspectives. And the primary biological perspective we employ is the theory of evolution. Traditional foci of physical anthropology or biological anthropology are diverse, and they include human evolution, also known as paleoanthropology. This studies the origin and development of the human species. Primatology, which studies the origins and evolution and behavior of other living primates. Human growth and development, this is a very important one. It studies the role of our environment in the human growth process. This is very, very important because we need to think about the environmental factors that could affect our human growth and development. Take, for instance, the Flint water crisis. In Flint, Michigan, they have the water system, the public water system, had lead contamination for a very long period of time, contamination that went undetected and underreported for a very long period of time. We need to think about the detriment to human growth and development of anyone who is consuming that water. How did consuming that water affect pregnant women? How did consuming that water affect nursing infants? How did consuming that water affect children and their brain growth? Human growth and development is very important because it deals with people who are alive. And we can think about environmental variables such as not just natural environmental variables, but cultural environmental variables. We have the ability to produce water that doesn't have lead contamination. And yet at Flint, Michigan, that ability failed. And now there's a detriment to those people. We also have to think about human variation. Biological anthropologists study human variation, studying how and why humans vary genetically. We're all one species, but there is some genetic variation amongst us. And this genetic variation is often the result of our local environments. Not coming back to lead contamination in water doesn't produce that kind of variation, doesn't produce genetic variation that gets passed on from one generation to the next. But instead, we're looking at genetic variation in terms of lung capacity, in terms of acclimatization, essentially. We will explore these topics in detail throughout this semester. Knowing what the four subfields are, let's take a look at how they work together. Anthropologists are found in the private sector and in colleges and universities. Most anthropologists practice what we call applied anthropology. This is the use of anthropological methods, theories, practices, and insights to help deal with real-world issues. Applied anthropology contributes to problem solving in an organization or in a developing nation. So now that we've explored what anthropology is, let's look at how we study culture. Anthropology is a science. We need to remember that. Anthropology is a social science, and anthropologists use scientific approaches to study humans. We collect empirical data, not just intuition. We don't just have a hunch. We actually collect data and interpret that data. And our data is both quantitative and qualitative. Quantitative data is a number. Qualitative data describes. So I could say, well, we have 42 pens. Quantitative data, 42 pens. And I could say we have, those pens are blue and black pens. That's qualitative. Okay, so we have quantitative data and we have qualitative data. We employ the scientific method as we collect our data. And our data collection process is called fieldwork. Fieldwork is the means and location of data collection. We literally work in the field. That's what fieldwork is. It's working in the field, not just in a field like a farm field, but a field of study. The field could be, for an archaeologist like me, it could be out in a forest, or it could be in a city center sometimes. I've excavated in city centers. I've done a lot of urban excavation. It's very, very challenging, and I appreciate that challenge. For a linguistic anthropologist, it could be simply sitting at a bar, chatting with people. For a cultural anthropologist, it could be sitting at a bar. I have a colleague of mine who is a cultural anthropologist that studies Manchester United fans and their culture. He literally goes around looking at football fans, or as we call it here in the United States, soccer fans, right? Talk about cool. right? He gets to go around and basically hang out with a bunch of soccer hooligans. He's got some really good stories, too. So we have to think about working in the field. The field could be a lot of different places. For a biological anthropologist, the field could be in a hospital. If you're studying modern human variation, if you're studying non-human primates, you could certainly be in a forested environment studying apes in their native environment, or you could be working in a zoo. There are anthropologists all over the place. Regardless, all 4 subfields conduct fieldwork. Anthropologists from all subfields conduct fieldwork. And fieldwork is conducted in those diverse locations to collect diverse data. Now, fieldwork can be rough. It can be tough. Imagine living overseas with a different culture for extended periods of time. And not all anthropological fieldwork is conducted overseas, but imagine living in a place that you're not used to. You have to face a lot of challenges in the field. You might have to adjust to foreign or unfamiliar lifestyles. There might be different foods than what you're used to. There might be different climates than what you're used to. Therefore, you might have different allergies that you didn't know you had. This has happened to me. There might be language barriers. There might be medical challenges. What happens if you get hurt? Who foots the bill if you have to go to the hospital? This has happened. I've been on many projects where we've had to go to the hospital. Some for more serious issues than others. We also have other less obvious challenges. We have to think about permits. We can't just go and do anthropology because we want to. We have to get permission to do it from the local population. That's very important to keep in mind. We have to think about funding. Anthropology can be expensive, especially when it comes to archaeology and biological anthropology. Those are very, very expensive. We have to think about family obligations. I have missed weddings. I have missed one of my really good close friends' funerals. I didn't know that he died unexpectedly, and I was in the field, and I didn't have access to any kind of communications to know what happened. We have to think about missing birthdays, right? We have to think about local politics. Local politics, small town politics. You want to steer clear of that. You want to stay neutral. It's very important that we do that. You don't want to get someone angry and then have them come to power and you're not going to get a permit, right? So we have to think about all these different challenges that we have to navigate. So despite fieldwork being tough, being difficult, being challenging, there's a lot of rewards to fieldwork. With fieldwork, you create lasting friendships while also making a contribution to science. Those lasting friendships are with your colleagues. There are other anthropologists. They are with your population that you're living with. My work in Sicily, I am an archaeologist that does a lot of work in Sicily. I have friends over there a lot of friends over there that work in different fields. I have one that's a city assessor. I have one that before COVID, he was a first mate on cruise ships, and he was going all over the world on cruises. He did a lot of cruises to Hong Kong. He did cruises along the Alaska coast. He did cruises that would go back and forth between Europe and Florida. He's done a lot of these, and then in the Mediterranean, up in Scandinavia, also he's done a lot of stuff. And he's a buddy of mine from the small town on the interior of Sicily. So we develop a lot of lasting friendships, where those friendships are durable. They last. Likewise, you had that contribution to science. You are contributing to science. You are making that contribution to our understanding of the past. Now, during and after our fieldwork, we must consider the impacts of our study. We have to think here about the ethics of anthropology. The data that we collect can be very sensitive, and this can include data regarding political affiliation, sexual identity, locations of burial sites, and many more things. Before we conduct fieldwork, we have to consider who will use the data. For what purpose will they use the data? Who decides what research questions we can ask? And who profits from the research? Consequently, we must consider the potential adverse effects of our research. If we're studying political affiliation, what happens 10 years down the road? If the opposition party takes control, are the people that we study, are they going to be ostracized? Are they going to be executed? We have to think about these. Who could, not just who does use the data, but who could use that data, right? So our study of humans is global in scope. Anthropologists study humans on all continents and in space. We have anthropologists that have studied the culture that's developed among astronauts on the space station. Humans are globalizing. We are globalizing our commerce, our politics, and our travel. As we know, humans travel all over the place. If nothing else, coronavirus has attested that humans spread ideas all over the place, but likewise we can spread a virus all over the place, and relatively quickly too. So we need to think about the global interconnectedness of cultures. Cultures are interconnected globally, and globalization affects cultures. Individuals and cultures are transformed socially, linguistically, biologically, and materially. So please keep this in mind throughout the semester. In sum, anthropology employs the scientific method to conduct well-planned research. We're not just using intuition. We're not just seeing what happens. We develop really well-planned research projects. And this ensures that all fieldwork and research is ethical. This accounts for global comparisons of culture. And finally, we need to remember that anthropology is really fun. We get to be essentially tourists, visiting all these different cultures and getting to know them really well. We're not the tourist that shows up for a day or two. We're the tourist that shows up and really gets to know that culture because we're interested in them. And we're not there to exploit them. We're not there just because they have a really, really good kind of food or something like that. Instead, we're there because we want to know about their culture. So it's more than just tourism. It's an investment in culture. That's what it is. All right, please make sure you remember to complete all the assignments and discussions posted in the module, and let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.